All right, they're calling it a 1-2 sort of economic liftoff for the economy if the tax cuts go through, and then later next year an infrastructure plan that could add a lot more goose to the economy as well. Former Housing Urban Development Secretary under President Bill Clinton, Henry Cisneros, with us right now. Secretary, good to have you.
Neil, glad to be with you again, and best of the holidays to you.
To you as well, sir. On the infrastructure goals the administration has, and he hopes to have a lot of bipartisan support there, there's so much we don't know, but this much we do, that kind of stuff can be stimulative if properly channeled. What do you think of what the president wants to do?
Well, it would be hugely stimulative, and it should have a lot of bipartisan support. Our country not only needs the roads and power stations and airports and seaports and deepening of river channels and so many things. Some estimates are $1.5 trillion deficit in terms of infrastructure needs. That's unmet needs. And we know that we're dealing with slower broadband than other countries, seaports that need to be deepened for the arrival of the new big ships coming through the Panama Canal, issues related to road congestion, power stations that need to be transitioned from traditional to renewables, just all kinds of things.
There are a lot of projects out there. An idea that's been bandied about, Secretary, are these so-called infrastructure bonds. Companies, individuals could take advantage of them. It sounds a lot like the war bonds back in the early days of World War II to facilitate our rebuilding effort. What do you make of that? Now, so much we don't know. Devil's in the details, I grant you, but that this would be a way to encourage people to invest in this.
Well, it is a way, and we saw it in 2008 when there were something called Build America bonds, and we saw a boom in infrastructure improvements that were needed to get the country out of that great recession. So I suspect that there'll be some aspect of that. The president has talked about $1 trillion commitment to infrastructure. It turns out that maybe a fifth of that would be with actual federal funding, and the rest will have to be ways to draw private capital of all kinds, through the bond system, through pension systems and private commitments to infrastructure to deal with $1 trillion worth of infrastructure needs. There's some carryover to the present discussion on tax reform, in the sense that there is in the Senate bill the allowance of what's called private activity bonds, but not in the House bill. And I would implore the House, the conferees, to allow private activity bonds to continue, because they are a way to draw private capital to infrastructure needs, and also to another category that's very important to the economy and Americans generally, and that is affordable housing. We have all over the country massive shortfall in the availability of affordable housing, and these private activity bonds are needed for that. So I'm very hopeful that when the conferees get together, they will see that that's something that's needed in the final tax reform bill.
You know, many in the real estate industry, you mentioned housings, are very concerned about this idea where, especially in high tax states, they'll not be able to deduct state local taxes beyond up to $10,000, I guess. They're rejiggering that. Something could change. But the housing industry fears that. They fear that a lot, and that it could be damaging. Do you?
Well, in something like a tax reform bill, there's immense complications, many moving parts, and it's so easy in tweaking something to have an unintended effect. And I think we're going to see a lot of that going forward. What you mentioned in real estate is one of those possibilities. Yeah. In the municipal field, for example, this cutting off of advance refundings, which makes it possible for municipalities to save when interest rates drop, is a problem. It cannot be fixed in the conference because it was both in the House and the Senate measures. But the timing of it can be influenced. So the interconnection, Neil, between what's in the tax bill, what matters in the public sector, in the municipal field, for example, and then what happens in corporations, in productivity, in competitiveness, as our infrastructure improves, is very key. These things are all tied together.
They are tied together. Could I ask you this? We live in this.
That after tax reform, the administration will transition to infrastructure bills.
The Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, in the meantime, we've got this.
It's the next priority.
Understood. But we've got this craziness going on. It seems every day someone in Congress is resigning over harassment issues. Al Franken yesterday, of course, Trent Franks, of course, indicating that he too will be stepping down. More revelations seem to come out in corporate America as well. It wasn't too long ago, sir, that a colleague of yours, Democratic Senator Kristen Gillibrand, had been saying, and of course keep in mind that Bill and Hillary Clinton made her career, came out against Bill Clinton, saying this.
Is it your view that President Clinton should have stepped down at that time, given the allegations?
Yes, I think that is the appropriate response.
What did you think of that?
Well, Neil, you know, this issue is very sad and very complex, and it's somewhat generational. Things that people thought they could do or were acceptable, women who felt that they had to be silent, all of that is changing. So it's very difficult to sort of roll back the clock and say, well, this applied in an earlier period and try to apply today's mores. But it's clear that many people have been hurt in this process, women who were abused in the office place, et cetera. And it's very important that we take action. So some of the things that are happening today are probably in the realm of appropriate. It's just, this behavior has to stop. There's no place for it. But I don't think it ought to be politicized and say, well, let's roll back the clock and apply it to 20 years ago. I would say that we do need to keep our eye on the country's business, and these things need to be addressed. But in the meantime, there's some very important things like this tax reform bill and like the infrastructure bill that will follow that are critically important. I am hopeful because I believe in miracles. And yesterday there was 2 inches of snow in San Antonio, Neil. Christmas snow. So miracles are possible.
There is that. There is that. All right. Henry Cisneros, thank you very much. Good seeing you again.